We might get going because it is 2:50, and I want to make sure we explore and get as much insight for a very distinguished guest we have with me today on this panel. And this is a very important conversation to have as a result of actually a lot of what we've already heard today. But I would like to particularly welcome Ambassador Legowo. Selamat datang.
Selamat sore, terima kasih. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I haven't spoken Bahasa in over 40 years, I'll just point that out. Konnichiwa, Ambassador Yamagami.
Thank you.
And Namaste, High Commissioner Vohra. It is, I think, increasingly evident that we live in an economically and strategically contested region. If there's any region we want to be in, this is it. There are two global powers, United States and China, who are locked in competition for influence in our region, and that is likely to remain the case for some time. And I know this can be controversial. I know some of the members on my panel here have different views, but Australia is geographically big, but we are small from a population perspective. We're 25 million, whereas Japan has 127 million, India 1.3 billion, and Indonesia 270 million. So I do feel very small on the world stage. But we are considered potentially a middle power, and we do need to look at relationships with like-minded democracies in our region to ensure that we are building our trade relationships, our development relationships, defence, collaborating on global challenges like climate change, and ensuring that our region is prosperous in a post-COVID world. And it also seems that multilateralism has returned. And I suppose in the recent G7 meetings, we've heralded the return to rules. And I have to say it's been bolstered by a sense of relief that the US is once again participating in global decision making. I'd love your views on whether that's the case. And at the very top, it seems that a sense of normalcy is returning to global orders. And when we think about relationships in the world, and particularly in our region and our key partners, it's a problem that our borders remain closed. And the two-way flow of people and relationships between the countries in our region has paused. And that feels like Australia remains Fortress Australia. But I'm always of the view that crisis presents opportunity, a new opportunity. So can Australia use this moment in time as an opportunity to consolidate key relationships in the Indo-Pacific region? Can we embrace and leverage the Asian diaspora and the deep business, education and cultural links that our region represent? There are global events like the Olympics are about to take place, and are they opportunities for our region to come together? This session seeks to ask you, Your Excellencies, for help in what Australia can do better in Asia, and how our relationships with our key partners can contribute to a strong and open Indo-Pacific. And I do want to start with, there was a speech that Frances Adamson, the Secretary to DFAT yesterday at the National Press Club. She particularly called out Japan, Indonesia and India. The deepening relationships between these countries and Australia being critical to our approach to the Indo-Pacific region, focused on strategic balance and regional order based on rules. We've already heard today through the opposition leader, the importance of the relationship that Australia has with the three countries represented here in front of us. So the first question I have to the panel, can you talk to me about why your country is particularly special to Australia? If I can start with you, Ambassador Legowo.
Well, thank you so much, Ming. We always consider Australia as one of the most important major power, not only at the global level, but also not only at the regional level, but also at the global level. And Australia is right in front of our door. That is why it's quite logical that we attach great importance to our relations with Australia. There are so many regional undertakings to address so many challenges that we have before us in our region. It's been conducted with the partnership, in partnership with Australia, either between ASEAN and Australia or Indonesia and Australia. For example, one of the most important regional undertaking that we conducted with Australia is our effort to tackle the issue of people smuggling and trafficking in person that we call Bali process. The proponent of those initiatives is Indonesia and Australia, and also in counterterrorism. The result of which, among others, is the establishment of Jakarta Center for Law Enforcement Cooperation that benefit not only Indonesia and Australia, but it has benefited also many countries in the region. So again, it's quite logical for us to always attach great importance to our relation with Australia.
Ambassador Yamagami.
Why is Japan important, special to Australia? Thank you very much for your such a straightforward question. I think that is the most blunt question I have received since my arrival. I think Japan is important to Australia. First, trade and investment relationship. You might recall, Japan used to be the biggest trading partner of Australia from 1968 to 2008, 40 full years. And Japanese business was not here for short-term money. They have been here for long-term commitment. If you look at the investment, Japan is the second largest investor, only after the United States, creating a lot of jobs, creating a lot of technology transfer. If you turn your eyes to political security fields, Japan-Australia security relationship has never been better. Australia Defense Force, Japanese Self-Defense Forces are jointly working in places like South China Sea and East China Sea in order to maintain and reinforce free and open Indo-Pacific, along with like-minded countries like India, United States, and Indonesia. We have intelligence cooperation too. As the head of intelligence organ of the Japanese Foreign Service, I can tell for sure that intelligence cooperation between Canberra and Tokyo is quite astonishing. Finally, on this important point of people-to-people exchange Min mentioned, I would like to point out that we have the third largest Japanese community in Australia, only next to Japanese community in the United States, Japanese community in China, amounting to more than 100,000 Japanese nationals. And in a few years' time, we will catch up with Japanese community in China. That shows how much weight, importance we attach to our relationship with Australia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I would begin by saying that it's not just India that is important to Australia, but also Australia that is important to India. So it's a very mutually beneficial, virtuous cycle of a relationship, notwithstanding the difference in population sizes that you mentioned in your opening remarks, Ming. And why we are important to each other is because there is clearly a confluence of interests, a meeting of minds. There are complementary economies that work with each other. There is the increasing role of the Indian diaspora here, both in numbers and in what they contribute here. There are large-scale investments that have come into Australia from India in recent years. There is growing interest in India from Australia, businesses in recent times. And all that has led to the upgrade of our relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership almost exactly 1 year ago. Looking also at the future, when we are all of us convinced around the world, not just in India and Australia, but I believe also my colleagues on this dais and practically everyone else, when we are convinced that there is a need now for diversification of markets, there is a need for diversification of raw material sources, for more resilient supply chains, for more broad-based economic development, industrial development, reorganization of the way industry is organized and business is done. India and Australia are almost natural partners in that attempt when we try to look forward and both shape and secure our mutual interests in the future. Of course, there is also the regional dimension. We all, both of us, India and Australia, are convinced that we are members of the same Indo-Pacific region, that it is a region where we can combine with our beliefs and trust and the confidence that we have in each other for the better good of the entire region. And that is the attempt both in a bilateral context, that is also the attempt in minilaterals and plurilaterals of which we are both a part. So there's a high number of reasons why we are important to each other.
Yep. Can I just start with, as well, just a discussion about COVID, because really COVID seems to dominate, I think, all of our thinking in every country, and in Australia particularly at the moment. It's just, it's been highlighted again with the outbreaks in Sydney. Can I just ask, in respect of what's happening in India, if I just stay with you for a minute, it's been well reported, the health crisis that's there and the enormous toll it's taken in the country. Can you update us with what's happening in India? And how is Australia helping you in that fight? And what else do you need from us?
Thank you, Ming. Let me begin with the last part first and thank Australia for the support it gave us in the last 2 or 3 months when the second wave hit us. Australia provided us with vital supplies, very well thought out and targeted supplies of what was in short supply. In India, we got oxygen tanks, we got ventilators, we got oxygen concentrators sent from Australia to India, and we are very grateful for that assistance. The COVID, when it first hit the world early last year, India was mercifully spared the brunt of it, as it were. And we emerged quite well out of that. Perhaps that led to a certain degree of complacency amongst various quarters and circles in my country. And then when the second wave came in, which began just about in late March, it came like a tsunami. We suddenly faced a very large and infectious variant, a variant that was impacting a larger number of people in a much faster manner, that was affecting younger people, that was decreasing the time taken between infection and the need for hospitalization for those who did require hospitalization. And all of that led to a great demand rush, as it were, on the healthcare sector, on the hospital infrastructure, etc. So that was a pretty vicious last 8 to 10 weeks that we faced from this second wave. But I'm happy to report that it is now, once again, the tide is turning. The numbers of new infections are decreasing on a daily basis. There's certainly tens of thousands of new cases every day, which might appear huge for someone in Australia. But when you look at 300 or 400,000 daily new cases that were occurring during much of April, when we are down now to 40,000 or thereabouts, it's made a huge difference. Overall, we've had 30 million people infected in India. The good news is that 29 million of them have recovered. Just under 400,000 lives have unfortunately been lost, but we only have about 600,000 active cases at the moment. So things have eased up. The pressure on the hospital system and the healthcare facilities is now much less. So we have actually requested all partners and governments that we no longer require additional assistance. And I'm sure that in a matter of another few days or weeks, we would have beaten this second wave entirely. Our vaccination drive has stepped up. Vaccine production has again stepped up with the bottlenecks of raw material supplies, certain raw materials from Europe and USA. With those problems having been resolved, we are now producing once again much more. This Monday, this week, we vaccinated over 8.5 million people in a day. On Tuesday, we vaccinated 5.3 million people. I think the numbers are similar yesterday. So I think things are improving, and very soon we ought to be able to, well, in a matter of a few months, we ought to be able to once again resume vaccine exports, which we had done, rather successfully beginning in January, and which had allowed vaccinations to begin thanks to supplies from India in large parts of the world. We hopefully will be able to resume that again.
Yeah, it's extraordinary with the amount of cases actually in India, and you were actually exporting those vaccines as well. So, I hope other countries like Australia reciprocate, particularly due to our position on AstraZeneca. If I can turn to Indonesia, Ambassador Legowo, you talked about Indonesia being one of Australia's nearest neighbours, and that geographic proximity is quite important, especially when you look at the official figures. I think when last I looked at, there's about 14,000 cases on a daily basis in Indonesia. Can I ask you what assistance Australia has provided? What else do you need from Australia to aid with your fight of COVID, and also economic recovery, right? Because Australia, we've heard a lot about how well Australia is doing. What else do you need from us?
Thank you, Ming. But first of all, I would like to begin by congratulating the leadership in Australia for having very successfully addressed this pandemic, despite again some cases that now took place in Melbourne last week and also in Sydney. I would like also, before I answer your question, I would like to give an update also on the current situation in Indonesia. The situation is still very much challenging, and currently the COVID-19 are on the rise, especially if we compare to the situation in Indonesia at the end of February. At the end of February, we had around 10,000 to 12,000 new cases on daily basis. And after that, we started the vaccination. And starting from April, the number of new cases has dropped significantly from around 5,000 to 6,000, sometimes 4,000. But again, now, if you follow also in the media, yesterday, we experienced more than 14,000 new cases on daily basis. And this is, among others, due to the high mobility of Indonesians during the Eid holidays, which is against the government recommendation to restrict travels. So the situation is still very much challenging, and we've been very vigilant on this. And to address this, we have increased also the number of testing on daily basis. Now at least 60,000 testings been conducted by the relevant authority on daily basis. And we have seen more than 23 million Indonesians have had their first dose of vaccination, and over 12 million people have had their second dose. But again, we still have to work very hard. We envisage that we will take some more time before we could really see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we've been grateful to the support that Australia has rendered to Indonesia. Last year alone, we received around 100 ventilators from Australia, and Australia has provided also a soft loan amounting to 1.5 billion Australian dollar, soft loan that's been channeled through the Asian Development Bank. The nature of this loan is a standby loan, so whenever we need it, we could disburse the money through Asian Development Bank. And we got the support also from the business community in Australia, because despite this trying time, confidence among the business people in Australia is still very high. As you might have known, last year, Aspen Medical has signed a contract to invest around 1.5 billion Australian dollar also to build a health infrastructure in West Java province. Andrew Forrest has decided also to invest in Indonesia in renewable energy, and also in the area of education. Monash University has decided to open a full-fledged campus in Indonesia. So this kind of gesture have given a big boost to Indonesia when we still have to deal with this trying time.
Yep.
But again, with the support of our neighbor, hopefully not in the too distant future, we'll be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. I'm a bit disappointed if it was just 100 ventilators, I have to say. But anyway, that's just my view. Ambassador Yamagami, we're watching the Olympics come around the corner. There's a bit of controversy at home about whether it should happen or not. But how are you managing, or how's Japan managing the pandemic with the Olympics right on your doorstep, and potentially quite a lot of people, at least athletes, traveling to Japan?
Well, first of all, before I talk about the Olympics, I'd like to join my good friend Chris in commending the way Australia has handled COVID. I think it has been exemplary, and Australia has been standing out in the international community in that regard. Personally speaking, it has turned out that Japanese are not as compliant as Aussies when it comes to some measures.
I'm surprised at that comment, but anyway.
That said, Olympics certainly show will go on. Preparations are underway as scheduled, and in this regard, we heartily welcome the strong support expressed by Prime Minister Scott Morrison, along with G7 leaders for the sake of holding Olympics in a safe and secure manner. Every possible precautionary measure is being taken in this regard. More than 80% of athletes will come to Tokyo after getting vaccinated, and even after arrival, they have to go through every day PCR test. And when they are going against any strict regulation separating these athletes from ordinary people, or they will be just excluded from the game, or they have to pay the sanction. This is for the sake of protecting the health of athletes. Yes, this is going to be a very, very difficult job. But like Chris said, I think it is a role of Japan to keep upholding this torch of the Olympics at the end of the long tunnel of the pandemic. Once again, in this regard, my deep felt appreciation goes to Team Australia, because Aussie Spirit, women's softball team, They are the first team to have arrived in Japan. They are now going through training in the prefecture of Gunma. But like I said, they are being totally separated from the general population of Japan. So believing that they must be feeling lonely, my embassy and I have decided to send them Tim Tams.
If I can move on, if possible, because what we've also talked about yesterday and today are the deep people links between our country. I think you've talked about it already today. In the three nations we've got represented here, there are economic and political ties, but the people and social ties are quite deep, but also, if anything, developing and extremely important. If I can start with you, High Commissioner Vohra, India represents the second largest group of migrants to Australia after the UK. In 2020, Australians born in India numbered 721,000. Are we leveraging this community to the best of our ability to strengthen the Australia-India relationship? And do you think the border closures we've had in place has had an impact on this goodwill between our countries?
Well, I think the growth, the fairly rapid growth of the Indian origin community here in Australia in recent years is both a result of the strengthening of the Indian-Australian relationship and a contributor to the strengthening of that relationship. The Indian-Australian community here is highly regarded. I'm very proud to say that they are one of the most educated and skilled of the ethnic groups. They hold important positions, contribute with their talent to many important sectors of Australian economy and public life and society, including what could be one of the most important healthcare sectors. So they are highly, highly regarded over here, and I'm very proud of their contributions to their adopted homeland, Australia. In turn, because of deep cultural connections and bonds that we take with us when we move overseas as Indians, it works as a bridge between India and Australia, further opening and strengthening linkages and opening even new avenues of what we can do together. So yes, they are certainly a very important contribution to our relationship. I don't know whether we directly as governments leverage them in a transactional sense, but I don't think we need to. I think it is a natural evolution with the growth of the community that there is also an impact on the growth of the relationship. So certainly that is an important part.
And the border close.
And the second part of your question, well, I think there are obviously difficult decisions that governments need to take at times. They are sometimes unpopular decisions that governments have to take at certain times. But decisions are usually based on expert advice, and there was a time when perhaps the advice to the government here was to close the border, but these are, I think everybody understands the reasoning behind it. I think everybody accepts, even if grudgingly, that these border closures are precisely the reasons why Australia has been so successful in containing the pandemic and why all of us are able to be present on the same dais and in the same hall without masks and with just the most rudimentary of social distancing. But I think nobody finds fault in that reasoning. But some people who are negatively impacted by a certain decision, I think it's equally understandable that they would be a bit miffed and a bit upset for a while. But these are temporary measures. I'm sure things will return to normal soon.
Very diplomatic answer. I wouldn't expect anything different. Ambassador Legowo, if I can start with you. One of the concerning things that I saw recently was the drop in number of Australian students studying Bahasa. It's at the lowest level it's been for a very, very long time, if not the lowest. How important is it, such things like language to build that bridge? And we had President Widodo here last year talk about the partnership between Australia and Indonesia. How important is it to have things like language and learning languages of other countries like Indonesia? And if you can also talk about the impact of the border closures on student mobility and the impact on that on the Australian-Indonesian relationship.
First, about the teaching of Indonesian language, we are very much aware that there's decline in the teaching of Indonesian language in some high school in some state. And actually, I've spoken with the Minister for Education also at the federal level, at the state level, because we deem it very important for us to enhance the teaching of Indonesian language in high school and also at the university, because I think it is in the interest of Indonesia and in the interest of Australia also to have more Australian who could be more literate about Indonesia, and to have more Indonesian who could be more literate about Australia, because this will contribute significantly to our joint effort to enhance the people-to-people connection, which has become one of the most important pillars in the relations between our two countries. One of the problems indicated by some high schools in Australia is the lack of teachers, and actually we have expressed our readiness to support also Indonesian language teachers from Indonesia, and hopefully that we could make this happen in the near future. We are very mindful about the border closure because of this global pandemic. About the mobility of the students, we can view this issue at least from two perspectives, from the perspective of the enhancement of the relations between Indonesia and Australia, and on this, like the teaching of the Indonesian language, we are of the view that the mobility of students could contribute significantly in the enhancement of the people-to-people connection. And the second standpoint is from the perspective of parents. I think the current situation is the last thing that parents want to see nowadays, because for them, by sending their children to study in various universities in Australia, their main intention is to prepare their children to become a better person, to become an agent of change after they return back to Indonesia. And this could only be achieved, this could not be achieved through an online learning, because this is about education. This is not only about transferring knowledge. This is about effort to prepare one to become a better person. So hopefully we really urge the government of Australia at the federal level and at the state level could open the border, not in the too distant future, for the return of international students, including those from Indonesia. And in this regard, I would like to commend the initiative taken by New South Wales government with their pipeline programs to receive the return of international students. I think the government of South Australia has done a similar program also, and I would like to commend also the initiative taken by Charles Darwin University with their pilot project in facilitating the arrival of international students, including those coming from Indonesia, and it has been quite successful. And we could prove also that they did not pose any health threat to the community as long as they adhere strictly to all the health protocol at the point of departure and also at the point of arrival. So hopefully that the border could be open soon, at least to accommodate the return of international students.
Yeah, just on that point about parents, do you think Australia's, the experience we've had with managing COVID and the fact that we have low levels in this country, would parents see that as a positive from Indonesia in terms of sending their, well-loved children to another country?
Well, Australia, as I mentioned earlier to you, Australia has been very successful in dealing with this global pandemic, and in addition to that, Australia is very known also for the high quality in the higher education of its higher education. So I think with that, actually, there has been a shift in the interest of parents in Indonesia. Before, their orientations is always United States or Europe. And now, taking into consideration of those things, they tend to send their children to Australia instead to send their children too far away from home.
Yep.
And again, with that condition also, that is why they really appeal that Australia could open the border, because actually there are two categories. There are two categories of students coming from Indonesia. Those who were not able to return back to Australia after Australia has closed the border back in March 2020. The second category is the newly enrolled. Parents have paid so expensive for their student, and then at the end their students were not able to return back to Australia or to come to Australia to continue their study. That is why they really appeal that Australian relevant authority could have some leniency on this.
Message heard. Ambassador Yamagami.
Thank you, Min. If I may expand on the point made by Chris, I think I couldn't agree more, Min, with the importance of language learning by Australian students, and this is exactly where Australia can make a difference from other English-speaking countries, say in North America or in Europe. Because after all, Australia is in the Indo-Pacific. So in terms of learning many other languages, including Hindu or Japanese, certainly Australia is best located to produce a number of speakers of those languages. In this regard, if I may be allowed to divulge a diplomatic secret, I've been traveling around all the states in Australia, and in one state, when I was meeting a premier there, he started the conversation by speaking Japanese. 遅れてすいません. Sorry to be late. Because he often resorted to this Japanese in facing up to Japanese language teacher during his high school days. He was always late for Japanese language class. But of course, he was not late for his lunch with me. He was just joking. But I think this small command, or even small command of colloquial Japanese carries you a long way when you try to do business with Japan. So now, Niseko and Hakuba are becoming household names in Australia. Why not come to Japan and speak a bit of Japanese? In so doing, you can further cement this bedrock of mutual understanding and mutual trust between Australia and Japan. That is my take.
Thank you. Just right now, I'm about to head into questions I've got for the ambassadors on China, because China's not here, so we can have a nice little conversation with 600 other people online. But I do want to point people to Pigeonhole. Please get your question in. I'm trying to weave some of that through the questions I'm asking. But there is also a poll question. I don't know if you know this. The poll question is, which relationship should Australia spend more time cultivating? And there's Japan, Indonesia, and India, or none of the above. So I think your performance today will see the results in the poll. But if I can just pivot to China, because they are not here. Ambassador Yamagami, Australia and Japan have a lot of, I think, are ideologically aligned in many ways. In dealing with very complex regional issues. How can we use our combined relationship to project our influence into the region? Can you describe how Japan is navigating the complex regional issues, and what has been your approach to China?
I think, we today, this afternoon, we started about talking how come these three countries are important to Australia, India, Indonesia, Japan. One of the commonalities I would like to emphasize here, especially between Japan and Australia, is we do share both basic values as well as strategic interests. When we talk about basic values, I'm referring to those universal values like democracy, a market economy, respect for human rights, and the rule of law. And strategic interests, yes, we are working together along with India, United States, and many others to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific. So, simply put, we would like to see the rule of law prevail in this region. Whenever we have disputes, we don't resort to unilateral arbitrary measures. We should do our best in trying to solve the disputes in accordance with international laws and norms. That's how we are further strengthening our ties with countries amongst Australia, India, US, Japan, Indonesia, and many other Southeast Asian countries. So here, by joining voices together, we would like to include as many countries as possible in the network of laws and norms. Of course, we have to be careful not to escalate the tensions on our part, but when push comes to shove, you will know who's your real friend. And this is the kind of moment Australia needs real friends, and Japan is hereby standing with Australia.
Thank you. Any sort of comments from both you? Maybe High Commissioner Vohra, I sometimes feel like Australia has, maybe it's in the past, has had a very colonialist approach to Asia. Do you think that, has hurt our approach to China? And, how are you approaching, picking up some of the comments Ambassador Yamagami said? I feel like with the three of you here, the universal values that you talked about also resonate with these two other countries. Can you just talk about that and whether Australia's approach to Asia has changed, and has it hurt our approach when we've talked about it in respect of China?
In a sense, much of Asia, until a few short years ago, was living in a world where the rise of one particular country, the economic rise particularly, was being managed and accepted quite well. It is only in more recent years where certain actions and behaviors have led to a certain disquiet, where the result of certain policies and certain ways of doing business, or even certain ways of providing ODA or development finance, etc., has led to actually results that were not expected by those recipient countries. There has also been a certain amount of aggression that we've all seen and we know about. We've certainly, as India, we too have faced some very inexplicable aggressive actions, particularly last year on our borders. At a time when otherwise things were going well, as I said, that despite differences in systems, differences in values, our political approaches, etc., things were going pretty good for most countries in terms of the trading relationship, etc. And then to suddenly face, as I said, inexplicably, aggression or attempt at coercion, etc., has led to a lot of disquiet. So I think it is quite natural in this scenario over the recent years for like-minded countries of this region who have a different approach to how interstate relations are to be handled, who have a different approach to how development should be done, how loans should be dispersed, the terms of some of those development finances, etc. For these countries, like-minded countries, to come together and offer an alternative model to the region. And I think that is the attempt at the moment by some of us like-minded partners of this region who share similar democratic values, who share the same importance of a rules-based order, freedoms, what Ambassador Yamagami also mentioned, to live by the rules, observe by the rules. For some of us countries then to get together and try and offer a different approach which guarantees that amount of sovereignty, that amount of a rules-based order and approach to how things should be done in our region. And that, I think, is the glue, as it were, that is coming together between some of our countries and Australia.
Ambassador Legowo, what's your view?
Well, first, we are very mindful of the dynamics, the relations between big powers. But first and foremost, I would like to emphasize that for Indonesia, we always practices an independent and active foreign policy, and this is the mandate of the Constitution. Active means that we have to actively participate in the creation of a peaceful and a just world. Independence means that the significance of independence foreign policy is that we do not want to be drowned into the current geopolitical dynamics between the big powers. And this approach has been very consistent since Indonesia gained its independence back in 1945, which we had not been swayed by the dynamics of the Cold War at that time. And talking about the dynamics between the big powers, actually Indonesia have a very good relations. We have a very good partnership also with all those big powers, and we only hope that the current dynamics in the relations between the big powers will not affect the stability, the security in our region, and we hope that they can instead enhance their collaboration in dealing with the current challenges, this global pandemic. Because this global challenges is something that is real. It has taken the life of over 3 million people worldwide. Something, I mean, the challenge that we really have to deal with together, because no single country could address this challenge alone. No single country will be safe until every country is safe. And this is the time for us to put aside our political differences. This is the time for us to work together. And hopefully the habit of collaboration, working together, could continue once this trying time is over.
Thank you. Ambassador Yamagami.
Thank you. I think, what is clear to all of us here today is, we are not living in the time of Cold War or any, binary, competition between two superpowers or two big powers. I think what is facing all of us, including, Australia, India, Japan, Indonesia, and many others in this region, is how to make sure this rules-based, regional and international order could be maintained and further strengthened. In that order, no one country, dictates what to do. No one country puts pressure on others by way of coercion or intimidation. That is a kind of regional order we would like to see in the Indo-Pacific. No country is free to call others smaller nations. So I'm a half-baked student of law. That's why I ended up being in the foreign service. But when I learned law, I learned every man is equal in front of the law. It's the same, applying to sovereign nations. Each nation, each state is equal in front of international laws. That is a kind of regional order. And in that regard, I don't think there is any disagreement among all the members in the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you very much for that. But we'll move away from China because there are other things I do want to talk about. Just really briefly, just on, I think, the bilateral relationships between the two countries. What can we actually do to elevate the importance of these relationships in the Australian mind, because so much of our media is dominated by the relationship with China and what's happening with it and how China impacts all of these other relationships. What do you think we need to do to elevate your three countries, in terms of that importance in the Australian people's minds, in the media? Start with you.
Well, if you were to look at the Lowy Institute's latest poll that was released yesterday morning, I believe it shows that Australians trust India at the same level as they trust the United States. I think that's 8 out of 10 Australians. So in a sense, I think that belief in India being a factor for good for Australia, for this bilateral relationship to be a contributory factor for Australia and Australians and the future, is itself showing that much work has perhaps been done or has evolved naturally over the course of the years. In terms of governments, there is, of course, lots that we need to do together. While most of us are, all of us are at the level of comprehensive strategic partners with Australia, the actual level of trade and investment flows and other interactions perhaps differ appreciably. I certainly think that one of my jobs here is to try and enthuse Australian businesses and corporates to look a little better at my country for exports, for imports, and for investments, more than what they have done in the past, that there's been a certain amount of complacency in the Australian corporate sector with pretty much all eggs in one golden basket. But perhaps I need to tell them that there can be and there are other destinations and countries such as mine which are equally, if not better, place to do business with and to make profits from.
And you have cricket in your favour too, I'll just put that way.
And we are
and on that sport, we've obviously got the Olympics, which will put Japan on the map in Australia, because we'll see all the sportsman country that we are, we'll see that in the media. What else do we need to do, Ambassador Yamagami?
Well, I'm not at all pessimistic about the future of Australia, Japan relationship. If there is any improvement to be made, like my friend Manpreet from India said, I think throughout all these difficulties in the recent past, I'm quite sure our friends in Australia have come to realize the danger of putting all the eggs in one basket. And this is a kind of bitter lesson we learned about 10 years ago, because we are subjected to the same kind of trade restrictive measures on our part. So in that regard, we all know the importance of risk diversification and seeking alternative markets. By the way, we are yet to see high-quality Australian wine in the Japanese market. So why not this time?
That's right.
Australian beef has been enjoying the #1 position in the Japanese market for so many years. If you can do it with beef, why not with wine? That is my point. So there are plenty of opportunities available in all of these three countries, India, Indonesia, and Japan. So I think there is a lot we can do. We can do together.
Yep. I'm just going to pivot, sorry, because we are running out of time. There is one very left field question I want to throw to the three of you. If I can start with you, Ambassador Legowo. What is the gender mix of the diplomatic corps of your respective countries? And I'm just drawing on the fact that Frances Adamson yesterday particularly highlighted the work that she had done to improve the number of women in the diplomatic corps for Australia. So the question is, what's the gender mix in the diplomatic corps for your countries? Because we can help with that too.
We are so lucky that we have a female foreign minister. And now this actually, when we recruit diplomats, we always have more female diplomats than male diplomats. So in the 5 years to come, I think we will be the one who became an endangered species. We are the one that need to be protected. And we are very lucky. We are very lucky because together with Foreign Minister Mary Spain also, Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi and Foreign Minister Mary Spain have encouraged the participation of women also in the peacekeeping forces. And we work very closely with Australia in this regard. So again, I think gender is not an issue for us. We used to have a female president also, and now we have a female foreign minister, and now we start to have more female diplomats in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Good to hear. We can start with Ambassador Yamagami.
I think the situation is same in Japan. I think looking back, the college graduates of this past March and April, majority of new entrants expected to be future ambassadors in the Japanese Foreign Service, women. So men are outnumbered. That said, as a professional diplomat, I would like to see the day we are living in the gender-free society. It doesn't matter whether you are female diplomat, or you are male diplomat. What matters to us is whether you are capable or not.
Commissioner Vohra.
Well, in terms of purely Ms. Frances Adamson's position, I have to say that we've done 3 times better. We've had 3 foreign secretaries, lady foreign secretaries.
So you're saying we're being left behind?
Overall. In recent years, our recruitment into the Foreign Service, annual recruitment, we are seeing an increasing proportion of ladies being able to make the grade and be selected and appointed. Overall numbers, however, of the entire diplomatic corps, I don't think we are yet at Australia's level, but we are getting there.
Good. All right, I do have, we do need to finish up, but I do have the poll results in front of me. So the question was, which relationship should Australia spend more time cultivating? So 10.4% for Japan, 34.5% for Indonesia, and 51.7% for India. So well done, you get the prize. I do want to thank. You get the golden egg. I do want to thank the ambassadors and the high commissioners for their time today, and thank you for participating and giving us your insight. You are very important bridge builders for us between our 2 countries, and the insights you give us and how you help Australia with just obviously the relationships with your countries, but more broadly within the region, is incredibly important to the prosperity of the region and our respective countries. So thank you for everything that you're doing to highlight the importance of your 3 countries in our country. And we'll take away and try and get those borders open for you. Put it this way, I think all of us would love to have those borders open as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I think we do we have a break now? Can't remember. We have a break now. But do thank the participants on our panel today in the usual way.
Thanks, Ming. I'm just going to jump up and round everyone out. Can I just add my thanks to the ambassadors? Gentlemen, I hope you understand that we're very keen to have your participation in recognition of how important we think each of your countries are to Australia's prosperity and future, and the importance of the relationship with each of your countries, but also with the region. And it's something that has been a foundation for Australia's growth to date, and will of course be an important source of prosperity in the future. So please accept my thanks also for being a part of our discussion today. It has been a fabulous day. My notes tell me that I'm supposed to summarise the highlights, but most of you have been here all day, so I'm not going to do that. What I did want to do is take a step back and firstly thank everyone who has participated either online or here on the stage. Many of our presenters are CEDA members. All of our presenters have been people who we would see as close stakeholders and people with an important say in our important work. So I did want to express my thanks to each of them. We've covered a really broad range of issues: economic dynamism, immigration, cyber security, trade, defence and security. And I don't want to talk about the highlights from each of those, but what I want to take out is the messaging, if I could. And for me, it is about having braver conversations. It's about not settling for yes or no, black or white, open, closed. It's about talking about the issues that matter, exploring new solutions, not digging in on past views on defined solutions, but looking for new approaches and new ways of doing things as the foundation for our future prosperity. We heard very clearly from the Treasurer last night we should celebrate our success, and absolutely we should, but we can't look back on it. We need to use it as a platform for how we go forward. So they're the messages that I took away. Focus on the possible, not the impossible. Focus on the how. And just to pick up on Ming's final point there, I know there are complex issues around this, but I don't think anyone who was in the room today or last night thinks that keeping our borders closed firmly until the end of next year is somehow going to enhance our prosperity or our well-being, broadly defined. It is complex, vaccinations are part of it, but we have to be talking about a whole range of other ways in which we can find, I think, a different approach to the one that's currently before us at the moment. Hopefully we can continue that conversation. We've got another fantastic day tomorrow. It is going to be in a different environment. We'll be fully online. The team and I are jetting back to Melbourne tonight to set up in our home shop in Melbourne to deliver hopefully another fantastic day of conversations. We're kicking off first thing in the morning. I know Diane is jealous that I'm doing this, but with the Victorian Treasurer Tim Pallas and the New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, it's always an interesting conversation. You will have seen in my social media, I do reflect on the bromance between the two of them. In all seriousness, they are important players in trying to drive important reform, not least in the area of taxation. It would be remiss not to conclude by thanking our major conference sponsors, Commonwealth Bank, KPMG and AUDA, or AU Domain Administration, depending on your preference. I should also say, I think most of you will have downloaded the app. There's going to be a truckload of content on there. Anyone who's been kind of watching out there will also have seen myself and a few others of the team doing some little vox pops. So you can get some 2 or 3 or 4 minute policy snacks on the topics that we've talked about today. So if you're looking for a little short shot, go and have a look at those as well. That's it for our formal program, but in the spirit of making sure that you don't go away feeling less than satisfied, we do have tonight also an exclusive discussion with world-renowned economist Mariana Mazzucato. I've met her a couple of times. She's been on the CEDA stage before. She is amazing. I'm a self-declared fangirl, so you should stick around for that. Can I say, pay attention, because man, she crams in the insights, so you do have to be on your game. Can I thank the Commonwealth Bank for hosting this discussion and for allowing CEDA and our members to be a part of that and to hear directly from Mariana. She is a person who is challenging the way in which we pursue prosperity in the future. She's super engaging. That's going to kick off at 4:15. We've got a short break now, so hopefully you can join us back then. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you, in inverted commas, all online tomorrow. Finally, I can't really see them in the room. Hopefully they can hear me. The CEDA team has just been absolutely amazing, dealing with a lot of chop and change. I just wanted to express my thanks to each of them for the hard work that they've put in today, but also in the weeks leading up to this. They are a great team. I appreciate their efforts and I'm super proud of them. So on behalf of all of our members and the board, my thanks to them. Thank you, and we'll see you later.